About 12 years ago, I watched a bee fight a spider at SeaWorld San Diego. Back then, I was still mildly employed by the aquatic giant, and since the park is outdoors, a lot of the employee break areas are also outdoors. So that means the break areas are rife with nature, mainly bird shit and rats. However, on this particular day, I grabbed a coffee and walked over to a dock on the bay, just like the song. Started to watch my dreams roll away. A beautiful tune about depression and hopelessness and climate change. As I sat there dying inside, I was taken back for a minute when a bee flew right past my face, assuming it was going to land on the wooden post at the start of the small dock. However, it did not land on wood. It landed in a spider web. Now, this had to be by mistake. That may seem like an unbelievably stupid thing to say, but none of us know how bees think. I don't care how many David Attenborough documentaries you've seen. But I questioned it because bees are fairly notorious for navigational skills, and to miss this one so badly was laughable. And no, I didn't laugh at the bee, and yes, I wanted to. Now, when the bee landed in the web, the spider, whose web it was, went nuts. It acted like nothing had been in their web in weeks. They had almost given up, when holy shit, is that a bee? Now this is assuming, of course, that a spider has any fucking clue what a bee is. I don't know if they do, and oddly enough, my main reason for believing this is that for the most part, spiders are solitary creatures. They aren't exactly spreading information around to other spiders, for God's sakes. This wasn't Charlotte weaving out inspiring messages here, and if it was, the web would have just read, "Bee land here," which it certainly did. I also can't be sure of the spider community's reluctance to communicate with each other. Outside of the very public webs they create, you don't see a spider just out and about when not on the web. So stands to reason, when we don't see them, they could all just be hiding in the bushes talking shit about the day. What roly-poly bug tasted amazing, and what widow just ate Dave after one night of consensual exoskeleton action. Conversely, does a bee know what a spider is? I feel like this has more of a chance since bees in a hive communicate constantly. How they communicate and what exactly is communicated is obviously anyone's guess. But if David Attenborough is right, they're probably only talking about flowers and honey and maybe the occasional gardener. Of course, given that bees do spend a lot of time in floral areas, where a good number of spider species also hang out, bees could recognize the eight-legged freaks as stranger dangers and pass that along. Regardless of what the truth is, this spider and this bee reacted in supporting actions. The spider in the web was stoked. They crawled into action with the same intensity someone would in this room if I said, "You have a spider on you!" Perfect. It truly did seem like this was the spider's first meal in days or weeks, and they knew they only had seconds to secure this bee. Now the bee was freaking out. This led me to believe the bee did know what was going on and also knew it only had seconds before it was wrapped up tight like a newborn in the back of a rogue nurse's car. I couldn't believe what I was watching unfold. No one else was around me. I was experiencing this showdown alone. And at this point, it was probably better that way because as I kept watching, I realized something terrible. I didn't know who to root for. Here's the thing. On one hand, I'm allergic to bees. And on the other hand, I fucking hate spiders. I am not a man. I know what I look like. And honestly, it's allowed me to avoid a lot of real-life fights, all of which I would probably lose. But since I look like the least important guy in a biker gang, or the third bass player from Megadeth, I'm usually left alone. But I am scared of most things, and spiders are one of them. When I get to kill a spider, I do it with glee, from far, far away, like a sad, scared man. And on this day, when it came to spiders, I was already on edge. About 2 weeks before this web match to the death unfolded, I was taking the trash out of my house, through the garage to the trash cans on the side of the house. When I opened the side door, a brown widow fell from the door frame and hung dead on the web, just floating, knocking its giant dead body against the door. I quite literally leapt back into the garage and yelled for my wife. And that's when I looked up in the corner of the doorframe and saw several brown widow egg sacs. At least 3, maybe 4. I looked around, thought that would get a better laugh. I looked around. It's all right. It's all right. We don't like math. We don't like math. I looked around for a broom or something that I could use to knock the sacks down and stomp on them or something. But the only thing I could find was a long grill lighter. I then looked at the front of the garage and saw a can of Raid, and I had an idea. I was going to light these things on fire. But I wasn't going to do it aiming the fireball at the doorframe. I'm not a big idiot. I totally did that. So I aimed the can and the lighter, and I let it rip. The web disintegrates, the egg sacs fall to the ground, and I aim the flame down, and I keep going as long as the can holds up. Now listen, I hate spiders, but I did not like doing this in front of their dead mom. After the flame died down, I looked at the egg sacs, and nothing had happened to them. They weren't charred, so I stomped, and the sacs didn't break or bust or anything. I ran upstairs to my wife. I told her there was a dead brown widow in the doorway in the garage and that her egg sacs seemed to be indestructible. She laughed at how genuinely scared I was. And then she told me to just Google what to do. So I did. And here's what Google had to say about brown widow egg sacs. They are very hard to destroy. And if you do break it open, you run the risk of hundreds of babies escaping into your area. No. So their advice was that you vacuum up the egg sacs, drive at least 1 mile from your home or any residence, empty the vacuum, bash the sacs with the edge of the vacuum, and then leave immediately. This struck me as insane. So I grabbed my vacuum and some gloves, and I kept reading about facts about brown widows. Hey, did you know that they often play dead when they feel threatened? I ran back down the stairs to the garage where the brown widow was hanging in the doorway, and it was gone. And in that moment, I made a decision to leave the egg sacs alone. Why? Because I shit you not, I was worried that if I moved them, the mom spider would come after me and enact revenge, and you can ask my wife if you think I'm making that up. It is very clear to me that some spiders are liars, and all spiders are assholes. So I would not be rooting for the spider in its quest to kill the bee. However, bees can literally kill me. So how could I root for the bee? And listen, of all the ways someone could die, bee allergy is just about the most pathetic. A little bee took his little teeny tiny stinger and he stabbed you and you're dead. It's stupid and it sounds made up. And people often treat you like you're pathetic when you tell them you could die if you get stung. I found myself telling people that when a bee is flying around me, to just think about it like if someone was running around you holding a giant knife within an inch of your body the entire time, just waving it around, and then also for some reason it was buzzing while it was doing it. People who don't understand this are bad people, and they've never seen the end of My Girl. Watching this bee try to untangle itself from the web, I was shot back to a few months prior when I was on stage hosting a show at SeaWorld called Pets Rule. It was where dogs and cats and birds and pigs did some pretty rad shit, and people loved it, and it was honestly one of the best animal shows ever. Mainly because these were good animals, not bees or spiders. Every show would start with my character sliding down a giant slide to introduce 2 dogs who would then compete in an agility course. On this day, I walked to the front of the stage to give my introduction. And out of nowhere, a bee flew up and landed right on the chest on my button-up Pets Rule baseball jersey. The moment the bee landed, I had my arms stretched wide. So that's the position I froze in. Like a fully clothed Jesus. I couldn't figure out how to move my body, and I was trying to get words out, but I couldn't. Oh, but was I on stage in front of 1,000 people? Yeah, I was. Lines finally started to murmur out as I tried to continue the show with my arms stretched out and my eyes looking down at this bee just casually walking around my jersey. One of the animal trainers noticed something was wrong. He wasn't on mic, so he walked closer and he asked me if I was okay. I shook my head yes. I kept my head down and started the next line, when the bee then walked in between the gap of the buttons on my jersey. I had a full-blown panic attack. I was breathing heavy. I couldn't say words. I started to get lightheaded. The trainer again got closer and asked what was going on. I wasn't going to move my body, so I couldn't turn off my mic. And I was struck with a terrible decision. I had to break the magic of Pet's rule. I had to explain to the 1,000+ people in the crowd what was going on. Ladies and gentlemen, a bee landed on me, and it's made its way between my shirt. I am allergic to bees, and if this stings me, the show is over. The trainer came over and whispered he was going to shake my jersey to get the bee off, and I yelled, "No, it's in my shirt!" He said, "Okay," and we all just stood there in silence for 35 years. The bee finally wandered back out from between my shirt. The trainer jumped over, flicked my shirt, the bee flew off, and the entire crowd erupted into applause and cheers. Knowing how close to possible death I was in that moment, I couldn't in good conscience root for the bee to defeat the spider. I mean, what if this bee was that bee? What if it was coming back to finish the job and I just happened to move at the wrong moment and it landed in the web instead of on my neck? It could happen, okay? If spiders can play dead, bees can have vendettas. At this point, the bee was doing everything it could to wiggle out of the web. It was using its wings and trying to quickly fly back and forth to break free. The spider was not losing any confidence. It knows what its web can do, and it kept getting closer and closer to the bee, creating more and more web to quickly wrap around it. The spider was about to make its move, and that's when the bee noticed the spider for perhaps the first time. Again, did it even know what it was looking at? Was this the bee's Roanoke? 3 people, thank you so much. That's all. 3. I'm buying you all a drink after this show. The bee began unleashing its stinger, visibly aiming it at the spider and pushing it back and forth in a stabbing motion. I'd never seen anything like this, and if the spider had, he didn't tell me. The spider would retreat and attack with every bee stinger stab until it finally just needed to go all in. The spider made a quick move to the other side of the web, but when it did that, the bee twisted towards the same direction, and in doing so, broke out of the web completely, flew off, and I, who was absolutely all alone, watched the bee fly off with joy and audibly yelled, "Yeah!" I looked back at the spider, who did seem sad. And I get it. He was hungry. Maybe he'd never had bee before and was looking forward to it. I thought about putting the spider out of the misery I'd assumed it was in, but I didn't want to interfere. I wasn't going to play God. I wanted to walk away from this with something to learn. How could this situation apply to me? Was this maybe about my dad? I was just sitting on the dock of the bay wasting time. And 2 creatures I despised found themselves in a moment of truth. And in the end, my heart chose the thing that could indeed stop my heart. I openly rooted for the thing that could kill me. I felt like a Republican. The enemy of the enemy was still my enemy. But for a brief moment, it was an ally, in a battle where the prize was the gift of life itself, a life that in any other moment I would have ended immediately. So I guess in the end, I learned nothing. Bees can still kill me, and we never did find that spider in my garage. Thank you.